Hello, team. It's time for the Daily Detangler. All right, getting VUCA'd. What do I mean by getting VUCA'd and getting VUCA'd again? I did a detangler yesterday on what happens when VUCA conditions exist. And I'm going to double click into that and talk about what I do to detangle when VUCA happens. When I feel the effects of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, I can get overwhelmed. And when I'm overwhelmed, when trying to do something new, I can get tangled. The idea of VUCA is that it's normal, it happens, and it provides a lot of stimuli, even when I least expect it. And I have a choice to make what happens and what happens there. So in the previous detangler, I talk about the impact of VUCA, and I talked about above the line and below the line, and this is based on the work of Dr. Alan Watkins. And when I look at above the line and below the line, and I get pinged with challenges, questions, different inputs, emails, texts, all these things that can happen, those stimuli are because VUCA is the new normal, right? We live in a volatile, uncertainty, complex, and ambiguous world. Those conditions of VUCA create a lot of stimuli, and that can get me overwhelmed. That overwhelming feeling can create tangles, especially when I'm engaged in trying to figure out something new. So I call that getting VUCA'd. Getting VUCA'd means these conditions exist. I get overwhelmed because of VUCA. VUCA is a source of tangles, definitely, but so is change and engaging in change and doing something new and putting myself out there to do something new. And so that's the setup around why it's important to understand the impact of VUCA and the impact of change on doing something new, and on your physiology. In the previous detangler, I talked about and showed what Dr. Watkins talked about, which is your physiology and your heart rate can affect how you emote, or the emotions that you have. And those emotions, that energy in motion, because of your physiology, because of your input, creates feelings. And those feelings create and drive impact on how you think. And he talked about the impact of just a simple thing called your heart rate. So here we have a simple heart rate. That heart rate goes up when stressed. In other words, the VUCA conditions that we work in, what I'm saying is that can create stress. The volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, and ambiguity, that can create stress. And what happens there? And are we aware of what happens? And am I aware of what happens in my own, response, physiological response? And I shared in the previous detangler that I get this kind of, feeling, and it's normal. I shared some of my background with that, and why I'm so passionate about tangles and what I want to help people overcome, so that they don't dwell on these tangles and they don't dwell on this feeling. I want to help them move forward. So even though VUCA is normal, we don't have to feel this way. Even though VUCA creates a lot of inputs and stimuli and we can get overwhelmed, we don't have to stay there. And we have a choice. And to me, understanding that there's a choice not only in what I do and how I choose to work and how I engage to figure things out and get stuff done, I also have a choice in understanding how I process the different stimuli around me and the choice I have in the response that I give. And what I talked about in the getting VUCA'd first detangler, part one, was that this choice that we have, to engage in our purpose, to take action, and to elevate our awareness in the present, this can become a challenge when we have tangles. And those tangles can get in the way of taking action. So let's talk about that moment in time, and let's isolate that moment in time. So VUCA creates a lot of input, a lot of stimuli, and for some reason, I have a challenge in my response, right? So what happens? Maybe I freeze up. Maybe I go caveman and fight or flight or freeze. Maybe I lean into that issue and I explore it. What is my physiology that happens? What are my feelings? And then what am I thinking about, right? I have the ability to choose my response. And when I look at that, what I want to do is I want to engage, I want to act, and I want to elevate my awareness in the present, but something gets in the way. What gets in the way of that? Well, tangles get in the way, right? I don't have time. I need more information. That's not how I would do it. I want to get this right because everybody's looking at me, or this is a waste of time. That stimulus comes in and creates the tangle. The stimulus is grounded in the VUCA environment that we live in, right? So where does that come from? Well, let's talk about tangles in the context of something new. And let's just pretend it's a new communication. Well, that new communication can come in, and the source of the communication can be unexpected. The structure of the communication can be something I have to figure out. And then the style of the communication is something that I need to relate to. And in the conundrum in our scientific principles, where we talk about communication, there's a encoding, a transmitting, and a decoding. So when I look at decoding the information or decoding that communication, and I look at the source, the structure, and the style of that communication, I can get tangled. That communication is happening because we live in a VUCA environment. So maybe there's not a lot of structure to it. Maybe the style isn't necessarily something that I can consume easily. Maybe I wasn't expecting a text, so the source was unexpected. That VUCA environment creates a challenge on that communication. And I'm just using that as an example. So that communication comes in, I get tangled, and my response is something that I want to do differently. Maybe I need to respond differently, or maybe I just need to respond at all, right? Sometimes I just don't respond. So this idea of engaging and responding, especially in the work that we're doing, where the idea of we're all in it in creating stone soup, that response is critical. So what are the tangles that get in the way of that response? Well, the first one is I don't have time. So the stimulus is, I'm using the communication example, but what if it's a new situation or a new information that I wasn't expecting, or perhaps it's an assumption I'm making even, right? This is why I think this idea of discipline is important, to understand what's happening at that level. And again, we're looking at a specific moment in time, right? So boom, the information comes in, boom, or the communication comes in, or I'm put into a meeting that has a different situation and it's all new. And then there's assumptions that I'm making, and are those assumptions filtering and my bias filtering, all right? So I don't have time. So the new communication comes in, I don't have time, and I can't write out my assumptions. I don't say what information I need. I'm not sure what I can do, and I don't verbalize what's blocking me. So why don't I have that response, right? These on the right would be ideal, but what blocks me? And it really is, as Viktor Frankl said, it's that choice that we make, the choice we make at that moment in time. And I have a choice to make. I have a responsibility, right? I have an ability to choose my response. I can make that choice. And what is the time tangle to me? What is the choice that I feel like I have to make? And I don't know if this is right. So this is one of those things where I'll publish how I think about it, and maybe I need to adjust this. But to me, it's a fundamental choice between me and myself individually, or the collective, the we. And I feel like in the time tangle, I have to be intentional about choosing we, or the team, more than what I want to do. Sometimes I choose the team or responding over eating. Sometimes I choose to work on the weekends for the good of the team. This is the we or me decision of why I don't have time. And I ask myself, this question, and it's a hard question, am I willing to put the team and the outcomes before my own? And that's if the answer to that is yes, then I have to find the time. So this is a question and a choice, and I'm in control of that choice and how I choose to use my time. That's an example, right? So that's a trade-off. And sometimes I simply don't have time. And sometimes I simply don't make that choice of the we. I have to choose me for whatever reason. So that's something I have to be okay with in that regard. So, that's an example of a moment in time. New communication comes in. Is it me or we? Will I take the time to provide that response on the right? The next tangle in that moment of time is, new communication comes in. What blocks me from that response? Well, I need more information. I need more information. So what do? Right? What would I do to overcome that tangle? Well, if I feel like I'm tangled and I need more information and I need more context or more background, and it doesn't make sense, can I draw a picture? Can I put something out for reaction? Can I share what I'm seeing? Can I chunk things down and just do it, do something? And if I don't do that, what is the choice I'm making, right? In that tangled moment, I have to choose. And again, I have a response ability and an ability to choose my response. That stimulus comes in, the new communication, what's the response? Well, I can choose to be tangled, or I can choose to not be tangled. And to choose to not be tangled means I need to choose between I already know the answer, or I'm willing to explore. And the idea of exploring is how I get untangled. So exploring creates this ability to chunk things down and to respond. And I have to choose. I already know the answer, and I already know everything, or I'm willing to explore based on what I already know and what I think. So am I willing to put aside what I know for sure and explore other possibilities? And am I willing to suspend this desire to know more and more and more and more with exploring what is unknown? So letting go of the need to know, basically, and engaging in this idea of exploring to find out. So that's how I get untangled from the more tangle, saying, well, I don't need to know that stuff. I don't need to know it. Let me move to exploring. And by exploring, I get untangled in that moment, and I can move on. I can leave the more tangle behind because I'm now going to show up to explore. And if I can say, oh, let me explore that, I can take the moment, just a few minutes, to do the response. The next tangle is a new communication comes in, and it's like, well, I don't do it that way. That's the control tangle. In the control tangle, if I were detangled and I were actually able to move forward and let go of that and detangle that tangle in the moment in time, I would, scope it down, do one little thing. What can I do? I'd ask myself, what can I do? What is meaningful? What matters? And ask others to react. But if I'm bogged down and I'm tangled in the control tangle, how do I, again, I have that ability to choose my response. What choice do I make? What choice do I make? And the choice is either I'm going to enter into, I'm going to command and control this, or I'm going to enable, because the opposite of control is enablement, right? Ori Brofman said that. So if I'm going to choose to get detangled, and I'm going to choose to let go of control, and I'm going to choose to not be command and control, and I'm going to choose to lean in to enabling and say, okay, I don't do it that way. However, let's see if we can help somebody else be successful. What I'm really doing is I'm choosing and I'm opting into enabling the people, the process, the information, the technology to help others be successful, even though I don't know exactly how that's going to, equate to me individually at that moment in time. It's not about me. It's about enabling others and letting go of that need to control that situation and move forward in that healthy response, or that productive response, really, that allows us to engage as a team. So the control tangle comes up because of that new communication. I have to choose: am I going to enable, or am I going to try to command and control this? Right. Another stimulus tangle that comes in because of the VUCA world, and that stimulus comes in because of VUCA. And I have this need to do something right. I need to, whatever I'm going to do, it's going to be judged. I need to do it right, and that's the right tangle. And ideally, I would be untangled, and I would ask somebody for their reaction. I would ask open-ended questions. I'd take a step back. I'd ask myself what's really realistic here, and say, look, I don't have to be right. It's not life or death. I would move forward, and it would look like this response. But what blocks me from that is the choice, right? The choice is something I have to make. I get it. If I can get faster to the choice making, the decision making of, hey, I'm tangled. What tangle is it? It's a right tangle. What's my choice? Well, it's either I do it fast for us, or I do what's best for customers. And doing what's best for customers means putting myself out there. Doing what's best for customers is kind of inconvenient, right? It's going to make me look a little clumsy because I'm trying to close the gap to customers. So is it fast for us to make me look good, or is it best for customers, which is going to put me out a little bit more outside my comfort zone, which means I'm going to need to, learn a lot more. So that choice is really about, am I willing to put aside what's easy and do what's best for companies and the customer and the company? And that's that choice that moves me forward in the right tangle to say, well, what's right here? And also, even though I won't do it correctly and I won't have a high polish on what I produce, does it close the gap to customers, right? In an incremental, small way. And that's what really the right tangle is about, is getting detangled in that right tangle, is to take some sort of action that, no matter how sloppy, has the right intent and has that focus on change and closing the gap to customers, even if it doesn't necessarily come across in a highly polished way, and that's okay. The last one is you get that new communication because of VUCA. The stimulus comes in, and it's like, that's a waste of my time. I'm not going to do it. And then so instead of the response of engaging with humility, practicing empathy, looking for the win-win, and exploring what's possible, I don't make that choice. The tangle bogs me down, and it stops me from choosing. Well, what am I choosing from? What am I choosing between? Well, I'm choosing from dismissing that idea or accepting it as something worth exploring. And that's really the choice for me on the waste tangles. I feel like that's going to be a waste of time. Do I choose to dismiss, or do I choose to embrace or accept? And when I look at the choice there, it's really about accepting alternatives exist. Do I accept that those alternatives exist? And it could be worth the time and effort. If I don't accept those alternatives exist and the time and the effort, then I'm going to think it's a waste of time. So, and these things are, binary. They're opt in or opt out. These are the choices, right? So these choices, what do they look like, is really interesting. I plotted it out. So let's say I get a new stimulus that comes in. Do I actually acknowledge it? I mean, sometimes I just look the other way, to be honest, or I don't read it. All right. But if I do acknowledge it, does it make sense? If I don't acknowledge it, are you committed to engaging? And if not, do I let Catalyst know? Right? I need to do a better job on when I know I'm not engaging, letting him know what's happening and why. But if it is, does it make sense? Yes. Well, are you going to find the time? Yes or no? Will you explore? Yes or no? Will you enable others with this? Yes or no? Will you do what's best for customers? Yes or no? Do you accept that alternatives exist? Yes or no? If it's yes and you're still tangled, reach out to me. And what are these, right? Each of these are the question I just asked. Does it make sense? Am I going to find the time? That's make the choice in the time tangle. Do I agree that this is worth exploring and I want to explore? That's how I overcome the more tangle. Do I choose to enable others? That's how I overcome the control tangle. Do I choose to do what's best for customers versus what's convenient for me? That's how I overcome the right tangle. And do I accept that other people may have alternatives? That's how I overcome the waste tangle. Now, my bias is in that order to come top down, and if I can get past the time tangle, then I'll do the rest. But interestingly enough, if I flip this, which is the big learning from today, look at how this changes. This is interesting. I didn't really know this until I plotted it out. But if I come at it this way, if I flip it, do I accept that alternatives exist? Yes. Do I want to do what's best for customers? Yes. Will I enable others? Yes. And will I explore this? Yes. And then will you find the time? Yes or no? If I put time at the end and I agree to these other yeses, I've actually started structuring my thinking in the act of getting detangled. So this has been a huge epiphany for me on this detangler to not lead with the time detangler, the time tangle. My pattern is, and my bias is to always start with the time tangle. But if I flip it and say, look, there might be another way to do this. What's best for customers in this situation? How do I help enable others? And do I want to explore this? Do I agree to explore this? Okay, now what time do I have? Well, I only have 30 seconds. What can I do in that? So that was interesting. I'd love to hear your feedback on this little flowchart thing, to think about the tangles and the choices. Each tangle is a choice. And for me, if I choose to detangle myself fast and get to the action, that frees up more time, right? Because I'm not bogged down in the active decision making, which can take a lot of cycles. It can take a lot of brain power to make these choices and to rationalize the conflict in my head. So if I speed up the decision making, make it easier, I can lean in. And when I lean in, I realize that tangles are normal. It's especially when we're in a VUCA environment, and especially when we're in a there's new things that are coming at us. I can acknowledge that tangles exist, make the choice and move on. I can say, look, tangles happen in something new. Tangles can be easily dealt with. I can surface them, make the decision and move on once I know what they are. So embracing and understanding what they are is critical. And also tangles happen constantly over time because change is happening over time, and change means something new. So I experience tangles over time. And then at a moment in time, it comes down to making that decision. And one of the big things for me is pay attention to my biases and patterns, especially when I'm stressed. When I'm stressed, the detangling becomes more difficult. What do I feel when I'm tangled? If I feel alarmed or I'm resisting or I'm exhausted from having to choose to detangle, then I need to be aware of that. I need to understand what's going on with that. So that's my thoughts on the moment and using the detangles to understand what happens in the physiology and in the choices that we make in order to act and engage. And I wanted to share that based on double clicking into the tangles and exploring that phenomenon of constant inputs, constant stimuli, engaging in something new, and how the tangles help accelerate the decision making. And we all have a choice in that. Sometimes the choice is easy and sometimes the choice can be a little bit harder. And so I hope this helps detangle. Look forward to your feedback.